Those Space People, a podcast series of casual cosmic conversations with people working on exciting space projects. Today we have Surbhi Bagotia with us. She is an engineer at the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, and Surbhi has a background in aerospace engineering and has mainly been working on the launch vehicles of ISRO and most lately the human spaceflight mission of ISRO, which is Gaganyaan. Welcome to the podcast, Surbhi.
Thank you, Rachna. I'm very happy to be here. It is my first podcast.
I'm very excited as well, and especially since we've known each other since, wow, it's been 12 years?
Yes, more than that. Yeah,
13 years.
13 years.
Great. So you have graduated, we have graduated from IIST, which is the Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology. And then we were directly absorbed into ISRO as an engineer. So, and you were the second intake of this institute, right? It hardly had a campus back then. It was backed by ISRO, but still, ISRO was itself was not as well known as it is today
Yeah.
and not as covered by the mainstream media back then as it is today. So what gave you the confidence to choose this new institute for your bachelor?
Actually, frankly, I was interested in aerospace engineering, and I had this in mind that if it's a good institute and if I get into this course, I would really go for it. And what we found out then was that it was an institute started by ISRO, so we had a direct link to ISRO and we could do our internships or get to learn from the people working there. So that was a very obvious choice for me to fly so far away from my family and study here.
That was also another point, right? It was in Trivandrum and the other corner of the country. So what was your role when you joined ISRO, and can you talk about your career progression since then?
So I did my aerospace engineering in IIST, and I did my project in mechanisms. Basically, it's called the mole mechanism, which burrows into the soil of other planets, or basically, this was for the moon and the soft soil of the moon surface, the regolith. So having that kind of a project, I was working with Isaac Kurian sir in our college, and we got an opportunity to work in ISAC, which is now URSC in Bangalore, which is the satellite center. And from there, I had this inclination towards mechanisms, and fortunately I also got inducted into the group called aerospace mechanisms group in ISRO, which doesn't happen all the time that you work on something and you get in that. So I was very happy, and the first project that I started with was related to the human spaceflight project, although it was a very small system, but it gave me an opportunity to do the work starting from scratch, the design part, then the testing analysis, everything coming to the realization of the product and its integration and post flight analysis. So it was like a wholesome experience for me starting from the very beginning.
And how did you progress? Are you still working with the mechanisms, or which other roles have you worked in?
Yes, I'm still working in the mechanisms group, but the area has broadened out. I have been working for the payload fairing systems, which is the main system to protect the satellite when it goes through the atmospheric phase. And now, being in the Gaganyaan project, I have been working on the umbilical system, which is connecting the crew module to the service module for servicing and providing the oxygen supply and exchanging heat between the CM and SM. So these kind of systems I'm working on currently.
Wow, like you said, it's not only lucky for the IAST ISRO combination that you got into mechanisms from the beginning from your master thesis itself, but I think it's quite unique for any engineering student, right? For any engineer to do
Yes.
this. So this is quite awesome. So how does your typical work week look like? What do you do in a typical week?
So, for example, if there is a system design and development of a new system, we would take a very long time to look at all the inputs and specifications and start. It's a creative process in the beginning when we start thinking about how to bring together all the things that are required and form a system out of it. So I know I can see myself drawing once in a while how it would be connected, and it starts from that, and then we get to draw it on the software, the solid model of it, and then we slowly get into the drawing aspects and the actual calculations and analysis, both on paper as well as using all the tools available to us, the analysis, structural analysis, frequency analysis, and things like that. It takes a lot of time, this design part. Then it comes to the drawing generation and implementation part. So that is the part which I do not like very much, which is getting these things fabricated, and it involves a lot of talking with the agencies involved, and a constant follow up of how it's going, providing them with materials. But it helps us to understand what are the problems in actual realization, which we sometimes do not understand during the design phase itself. So it's quite nice, the whole thing. And of course the testing gives us a lot of confidence of what we have done is right, and we can go ahead with it. And finally, the best part is to see your system in action, which also I had the opportunity many times to have, to feel, to experience that. It was amazing.
Wow, definitely sounds so fascinating. I assume that you're usually working on multiple projects like most people at ISRO, right? So, how often do you have to context switch and how does that affect you?
Okay, so yeah, we prioritize our work based on the launch schedules and the other things. The main ongoing launch vehicle work, it is not continuous. It it peaks up during like just 1 month before the launch. If we have all these systems ready, then just 1 month before the launch we start preparing for it, and we have a few days where we have to travel to the launch port, Sriharikota, and spend a few days there, work on our systems, integrate it finally to the launch vehicle, and come back. So I would say those things take priority during the launch campaign, but all the rest of the time we have the time to design new systems, work on. In fact, we are encouraged to work on systems that we would like to be working on. It's called Technology Development Program, and we ourselves can propose projects, take funding for it if it is approved, and progress on that too.
That's awesome. Wow, that sounds really cool. Can you talk about what really happens at your center? What part of the rocket do you develop and design?
Actually, Vikram Sarabhai Space Center is dealing with the complete rocket. So we have people working on the solid propellants. Then we have people from the structures group, aerodynamics groups. My entity is the mechanisms, vehicle integration and testing. And then there are checkout and avionics. There are so many entities which work on the complete rocket. In our group, we work on the separation systems of the rocket. So all the stage separation systems, and also the strap-on separations. Then we have the system that I'm working on is the payload fairing separation systems, and also smaller systems like walls, or throughout the rocket there are smaller systems. So VSSC basically works on the whole launch vehicle.
So a lot of the cryo engine development happens at the other center in Mahendragiri, and assembly. Of course, we have the launch and a little bit of assembly happening at Char Sriharikota. It was originally probably set up this way because it was dictated by supply chain. Sarabhai or Dhawan, the pioneers, had to approach commercial vendors because to custom make all these parts and components at the very beginning, and that's probably why not just the launch vehicle, but
Yes.
the other satellite parts, right? Because we have the payload, mostly research happening in Ahmedabad at PRL and SAC, and it's quite spread out. And the image processing happening in Hyderabad and satellites in Bangalore. So this was probably the biggest reason, the supply chain demand. But do you see at any point everything getting vertically integrated at one place? Do you see for Gaganyaan or let's say future missions, ISRO trying to bring all stages of rocket manufacturing and even the satellite and everything closer physically?
I've never thought of that actually. It's so ingrained in us to work like this that I've never thought of it all happening at the same place. But if we have a big enough place to do that and all people at the same place, yes, maybe we can do like that. But the trend that I've seen in the past few years is that we are trying to give it out to the industry. So especially the PSLV, launch vehicle related things, are all being given to the industry, and they are the ones who are going to come and also integrate it at Sriharikota in the future. So we are still in the process of technology transfer, and there's a lot of things happening when we want to do that. Especially different centers are involved in this kind of process. I haven't thought of that. No.
Just curious because, after SpaceX has brought in this
Yes.
entire vertical integration kind of concept. So traditionally, no, I don't think any part of the world or any of the legacy space agencies do that. They all do it kind of ISRO style.
Yes.
So I was kind of curious. Yeah, like you said, maybe the industry would do this. It would probably make more sense for the industry. So yeah, speaking of SpaceX, how often do you guys, rocket scientists at ISRO, how often do you guys talk about SpaceX or these latest suborbital flights, Blue Origin, the Virgin Galactic's flight?
So, like we have small groups on WhatsApp and other places. Other than that, when we gather as friends, not so much, but in these groups which are dedicated to the things happening all around the world, especially all the new space tourism related stuff that is happening, we keep connected in these kind of groups on WhatsApp. And there are conversations on Reddit that I follow, but I wouldn't say I'm very, very active in all those.
How much of your time in a week or in a day is spent on documentation? Because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of documentation, ISRO being a publicly funded institute and, it being rocket science, literally. Yeah, how much is actual development, testing, and how much is documentation part of your work?
I would say that time of the design, especially when you have to make these kind of design documents which can be used later by people, and all the assembly procedures and all, it takes a lot of time in the beginning, but once they are set, we don't need to do too much for them. So I would say that in the whole design process, if you consider, it would be like 40% of it would be documentation, because you have to put a lot of time and effort into arranging all kinds of requirements and how you are proving your system to meet all those requirements. I think it takes a lot of time. Yes.
Wow. Okay, I've only worked on satellites, like really small satellites, and I'm glad it's not 40%.
I'm saying about the design process. Once it's done and dusted, when we go into the production mode or the launch, then it doesn't take much time because it's already there. Only a few changes here and there.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine launch vehicle is much more critical. It's much more complex. So yeah, I mean, it's reassuring. I'm glad that a rocket is getting 40% documentation, but yeah, wow, that's a lot. It's often said, right? The Apollo rockets or the entire Apollo mission, it cannot really be replicated right now because, well, if you take away the funding part of it, there are so many details, design details lost because none of the engineers who actually worked on it are either no more or they're no longer in service. You could not really have documented every single thing about those rockets and the whole mission. What aspects of rocket design cannot really be documented?
What I've seen in ISRO is that most of the things that are being used in the design and how we arrive at that are documented. But there is a lot of space from actually thinking it in your head and writing it in a document. All that iterations that you do in your mind, or the choices in your design that you look into, and the reasons for not going or neglecting or negating those choices, those are the kind of things that we don't really put into it. So if somebody is thinking in the future about why this kind of system was used, they don't know why the others were not used because it's not documented. So if they go back to those choices, they will learn the hard way that okay, this was the reason that it does not work so well, and that is why. So I believe that these things, when you go from your imagination to the paper, these things where you make these decisions are not all very well documented. That might be one part. And I think the actual failures that happen and all is and also the meetings that happen and what were the decisions or suggestions of the committee, those are all very well noted and documented in ISRO.
So that means it makes sense if a certain person has been working on certain part of the rocket design or the testing, it only makes sense for them to continue working on it and not to start something, I don't know, every 5 years, like switch your area and start working on some other part of the rocket design, because you lose all that legacy undocumentable experience of that person. So given that, how are teams formed to work on a specific project? So, how often can people choose to work on something else that they've never done before? And if there's a new project, how are you assigned into teams?
What I've seen is that in the very beginning, and I would say the beginning to be the first 5 to 7 years, people are kept at the same place because it's still a learning phase. And what I've seen is only after a certain level, like we have different grades of engineers. So after spending some 10 to 12 years in a particular place, people tend to look forward and explore other areas. So I've seen the switch happening much more at a higher level as compared to a junior level. There have been talks about these things, but we have to find a solution of how not to, disrupt all the work that is happening, and also explore these kind of things, because it is really good for an individual person to be able to understand different things. Yes, but it's very slow in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's a very engineering, it's not like software, right? So it's a very
Yes.
engineering intense. Good to know, but there's still a chance to switch. Most often in the space sector, right, teams kind of work in silos. So, for instance, the ones building the launch vehicle don't know much about the satellite, except for, let's say, its target orbit. And the ones who are actually building, let's say, an Earth observation satellite, they don't really, understand much about the image processing aspects, what really happens on the downstream. Zooming in a little further into just the launch vehicle part of this, how much does the structures team, let's say, know about the propulsion system, or how much does the mechanisms team know about the trajectory profile? And does it matter to know about this at all or not? Or what do you think?
I think it matters, and we have very less communication unless we are personally very interested to talk to people and go out and explore. But the one place where I have learned a lot is attending all these meetings of higher level committees, because those are the places where we can see why the other groups or teams are working in a certain way and how they arrived at it. So I've learned a lot from those kind of meetings. So whenever I find time and able to attend meetings which are not also related to my work, I do that. And being online has helped a bit, because during these times of lockdown, we could attend a few meetings which were related to other systems and teams. So the things get much more clearer. But I would still say that there is a lot of communication lacking in this way. Not only at center levels, but also within the center, how much we know about the different teams working and everything. It's a bit less as compared to what we would like to have.
What measures do you think could be taken to improve this communication?
Okay, so first of all, I think starting from a personal or a smaller team level, I think the higher management can be encouraging about these things, encouraging the new ones to go out and learn. I've seen a few people doing that, because some of my juniors, those who are working in the space transportation systems and those who are dealing with the whole launch vehicle, I saw them coming to us in Sriharikota asking us things about, oh ma'am, how is this working? How it's connected, or how do you bring it, and who assembles it? So I've seen many juniors coming up, and it was not only from their inside that they wanted to learn this, it was also an encouragement from their division head or group head, whoever is. So I think that can be done from the management level. And those who are approaching us for information, I think we should be open enough to share what we have learned. And if that kind of attitude is there, it would be much better.
Now that you've mentioned these online meetings, this is something quite new, I guess, at ISRO, at least compared to several years ago. COVID kind of digitalized the entire world.
Yes.
What impact did COVID have on the work culture at ISRO?
I think it was a necessary change which was brought by COVID, because we were all in lockdown and we still had to keep working. This kind of change I would not have imagined if there was no COVID, because I remember us going from one part of the city to the other part of the city to attend a meeting which was going to happen, because of course personal meetings are better, you can hear people better, you can understand everything better, but switching to an online mode has saved us a lot of time. And it has helped us to explore more different things. So if it was only a physical meeting to attend, I would not have gone into the other teams or other launch vehicles. But now, if I'm available, if I have the link, I surely do attend the meetings of other teams so I can learn more about the other systems, other launch vehicles. And in fact, the best part would be that remote launch control center, which is so they're handling everything from sitting in Trivandrum itself for something that is happening in Sriharikota. So that is wonderful.
Yeah, because a lot of people keep traveling, right? Like half the year they spend at Char, even though you're actually employed in Trivandrum.
Yeah.
Kind of disrupts, I guess, your personal life. So it's good to have that. So, like most publicly funded institutions, mostly seems like ISRO is also quite top down, as in the roadmap is usually set at the very top. However, that said, because you also have a lot of opportunities to suggest your own projects and secure funding. So, how much autonomy is given to engineers who are actually working on an execution of a particular project? Do decisions travel from the bottom to the top as well?
Yes, actually, the designers and the system development agencies have a lot of freedom to design the systems. We are just given the requirements, and we can, if we are meeting that requirements, we can propose different kinds of systems. And the first level at which these kind of choices are accepted or rejected is the a meeting that is before the preliminary design review. It's the system concept review. So that is where it's like we have to defend our system and say why this particular choice is better than all the rest. So I would say till that we have a lot of freedom. Even after that, we have a lot of freedom in the design.
How is the work environment at a large ISRO center? Because you work at the largest centers of ISRO, right? The VSSC. And I'm very curious because I only worked at one of the very tiny centers where everybody knew everything about everybody else. So, how do you find the work culture and the environment?
For us, I think it's very professional, and we do not have many meetups outside of the office. It depends on, like, if there is a, like, for now in my division we have a lot of young people, so we plan sometimes. Other than that, in the office the work culture is mostly professional. And if we are part of some kind of societies together, like aerospace mechanisms, there is a separate society, so then we have some meetups which are family oriented. But other than that, it's more of a professional setup where we help each other. And yeah.
Now that you mentioned young people joining, right? Gen Z is now entering the workforce, and they probably already started entering the workforce at ISRO. So, how do you think they would impact the ISRO work culture in the years to come? Because definitely a lot has changed since us millennials have been working for the last couple of decades.
Yes,
And how do you think this new generation would bring about a change?
I think what I have seen also, and I think it will be much more in the future, is finding solutions of doing things in a faster way, more automatic. Especially, I remember doing the post flight analysis and analyzing the data in a very crude way in the beginning, and now I've seen it being transitioned to something which is taking very less time to analyze all that data, so we can focus more on the on things that we can infer from the data rather than spending time on actually working with that data. So these kind of things I've seen improving, and I am very hopeful for the future too. And also the switching to new technologies, especially for smaller systems where we are given the freedom to change certain things. I think the young people would be having more creative ideas for that. I find myself now in the middle, not too old and not too young, so I see myself bridging the gap somehow.
Yeah, that's great. It's a fun time, I guess. Can we talk about your work probably a little more in detail around Gaganyaan?
Yes, of course. I was very interested when I heard that India is going to have its own, humans in space. So from the very beginning, I was getting it known to the seniors that I would like to work on that. And I also was somehow trying to find a way in which I can get related to the Human Space Flight Center and work there. But it did not work out. As I told you earlier, also now the work of Gaganyaan is still concentrated on different centers because we already have the necessary infrastructure for testing and the people, all the softwares required. So it's all in different centers. So I am working currently on this umbilical system connecting the crew module to the service module, which is essential for the environmental and life support systems for the crew, as well as to remove all the heat from the crew module and bring it to the service module. Service module is much more like a satellite, so it provides all the power and the oxygen and the other things. And crew module will be self-sustainable only during the re-entry. Till that, it will be getting all these things from the service module. So I am designing and developing a system which is connecting these two and accommodates all the fluid and electrical lines.
That sounds so cool. Like for someone who's only done electronics, we don't really get to see our work actually fly to space.
It's kind of very diverse. It consists of different agencies working together. So I'm from VSSC, but we have people working from LPSC, also from the Pyro divisions and URSC, the satellite center, because we are all working together. So it is giving me a very good diverse experience of how to work along with different people. And sometimes we have to compromise on our design in order to meet the requirements of others. So that is a, a challenge that we have been facing.
How do you manage version control in designs, right? So usually when we talk about software and when multiple people or groups are working on a single piece of code, so you have these automated version control tools and softwares that you use. Is there something like that for designers or developers who are working?
Yeah, it's called the configuration control for us, and it gets fixed once we go through the preliminary design review and we generate the first set of drawings and we control those drawings. That if we want to bring about any changes to that, that would be a change in the version of that. So we control it basically from the point of view of the drawings generated as well as the design document that was reviewed by a certain committee.
Do you use proprietary tools for this or commercial tools?
Not really at the moment. No, we have our internal configuration control teams. So we will have a chairperson for that, and we would be going and showing them our drawings and designs. And these committees for review, they're all internal. They are not. We are not using proprietary tools for that.
You're also a big part of the IIST, the Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology, ISRO's very own space university in India. You are a huge part of the Alumni Association of IIST, or actually the president. Congratulations again on being elected.
Thank you, Rajni.
You've been really involved and you've been running a lot of activities and you've been engaging a lot of alumni and students from the very beginning, almost, I guess, for around 10 years. So, what challenges have you faced in establishing this alumni association? Because it took quite some time and it's also very difficult to set it up and get it running and put some momentum into it, especially given the small number of people who are graduating every year.
I was involved from the very beginning, the first term of the Alumni Association governing body, which was in the past 2 years, 2019. But the first batch passed out in 2011. So there was a huge gap between 2011 and 2019. And it saw a few meetups, but not much. And I am sure not many people were involved or knowing. So there was a huge lacuna. And we are trying to just, bring back, as you said, the momentum. In the past 2 years, we faced difficulty in getting people registered also for this, because I think we need to have a more bigger campaign for registration and making people aware of the benefits of this kind of thing. I think one thing that prevents us from engaging too much in this is that most of the people, at least half of the people, are already set into their jobs in ISRO. So they don't have much requirement of engaging with the others outside of it. So they are all in their own bubble. And whenever there is someone who wants to go for higher studies or who wants to pursue other fields or change a career path, so that is when people start exploring these things. But we want to also tell and show that not only outside of ISRO, but even inside of ISRO, if we want to have a good engagement. And Rachna, we were just talking about how we can get to know what are the other teams working on. If we have such an engagement within ourselves, it will be so easy for us to contact anyone from that team and ask on a very personal, in a very comfortable zone. We can ask them about their work and all the kinds of questions that we might have about their work. So I think it will be very, very important both inside and outside of ISRO to have this engagement.
I completely agree. And also, maybe 20 or 30 years down the lane, when the alumni within ISRO get into these leadership roles closer to the very top, I think it's advantageous to the organization to have such close and personal ties between the various heads, the centers, and the top management. So, yeah, I hope that continues. But it's a great initiative. So usually space across the world, right? Space is a very, very small community. And even within this community, we have these tiny groups. For instance, we have the ISU, the International Space University Alumni Network, and we also have Space Master Alumni Network, and again, this IAST Alumni Network. And a lot of people belong to multiple of these networks. So, do you have anything in the agenda of the Alumni Association to collaborate with these other networks across the world? Especially now that a few IISTians, they've also gone on to these other networks. They're now part of these other networks internationally.
Actually, we had not discussed about this type of thing till now, but it's a very good idea, and this would be a thing which would be appreciated by all the alumni members, I guess, because that will help us to reach out and have a perspective from the outside of how it is, and the sharing of experiences at a higher level. So that is something I think I can pursue in the next 2 years with the new team.
Yeah, that would be fabulous. And I'm happy to help in any little way that I can. Surbhi, you also attend a lot of space conferences, not just the ones at ISRO, but then which are organized, let's say the ORF conference or a lot of other dialogues
Yes.
that are happening in India. And you must have encountered and met and spoken to a lot of people who are from outside of India or outside of ISRO working in space. Have you observed any changes in the mentality, in the mindset, or in the work culture compared to ISRO and at space outside of ISRO?
What I found in these kind of conferences was that I was myself going out of my bubble and trying to understand how the space community functions outside. And what I could see is that it's more interdisciplinary. I find ISRO to be very, very much into the engineering aspects and all that. Or maybe it's just because I'm at this level in the workforce. If I go higher, maybe I would be able to understand the whole connection of how we get connected to the various agencies and the but what I could see is that there was a lot of talk about space policy and how things should be moving in the future, bringing out systems which would make the business easier for the new space startups. So these kind of things are not discussed much inside of ISRO. We are mostly dedicated to the technical stuff, and only maybe the very, very higher management who is involved with the whole functioning of the country and the space industry in the country are having a good idea about that. But we at our level do not discuss it as much. So it was a very good moment for me to explore the things outside, get to know more people. I found some of our batchmates there, Pradeep, Gagan, and all those people. So Divyanshu. So it was good to connect with them at that level. And also, there was a very good conference on human spaceflight, HSP 2020, in the beginning of 2020 before the COVID started. So it was an international conference, and there were many astronauts and people. So I think we in ISRO can also bring that kind of enthusiasm which I saw in these kind of conferences. It was so great to talk to that person, the astronaut, personally, and understand their experiences, because it's not only this part, the working part, but it's also what happens over there and what we are venturing into. If we are fascinated by it, it is going to be very helpful for us to keep working in that field.
The public outreach part has been a little lacking, I would say, compared to the other space agencies. But I always attributed it to the lack of funding. We usually work on shoestring budgets.
It is still done, especially during the Space Week time, and many schools are being involved. So at least the younger generation is still being motivated and enthused by all these things. But yeah, we can still do. There is a lot of scope for improvement.
I guess it also helps that ISRO is already quite popular. It's one of the best performing public institutions in the country.
Yes.
People already have a wonderful opinion on ISRO. What skill set or advanced degrees are required for people to work on launch vehicles in general or in particular in your area?
So we have mostly mechanical engineers and a few aerospace engineers. aerodynamics and other things have people specialized into those fields. So all fields of engineering, from the basic fields of mechanical, electrical, to the specialized fields of aerospace, avionics, and also streams related to physical sciences. I think we need both people from the major fields of mechanical as well as specialized fields. There are people from acoustics, aeroelasticity, structures. Those are the kinds of fields in my work domain.
So a bachelor degree would be sufficient quite often to work here.
Yes, but in ISRO, if we have an understanding of how we can propose a project and work on it, understand the whole functioning, I think a master's degree would be beneficial. And I've seen that people from aerospace and avionics are not pursuing PhDs as much, maybe because of the leave restrictions and all those things. But a master's degree is definitely something which is important at this level.
Thank you, Surbhi. You've shared a lot of fascinating insights into how it is to work at ISRO. It's really cool, especially given that it's such a celebrated place in India to work at. So, if space enthusiasts or students or young professionals want to reach out to you, is there a way, and what's the best way to do so?
I can be contacted both on LinkedIn as well as my personal email address, which is just my name, surbhibagotia@gmail.com. I would be happy to help anyone who wants to know more or look for opportunities inside.
That's great. Thank you so much for your time, and it's so lovely to chat with you.
Thank you, Rachna, for inviting me. It was a pleasure from my side. I really loved talking to you this way.